To the flag of the United States of America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's not too fast. Miss Beck, will you call roll?
Zamora, present.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
Walker, present.
And whereas sexual violence refers to any sexual activity when consent is not obtained or given freely. And whereas nationally, 1 in every 4 women and about 1 in every 26 men have experienced completed or attempted rape in their lifetime. Whereas sexual assault impacts every community, it affects people of all gender, identities, sexual orientation, and ages. Anyone can experience or perpetrate sexual violence. Thank you. Whereas people who perpetrate are usually someone the survivor knows, such as a friend, or a former intimate partner, co-worker, neighbor, or even a family member. And whereas there is compelling evidence that we can be successful in reducing sexual violence through prevention, education, increased awareness, and holding perpetrators who commit acts of violence responsible for their actions. Whereas we must work together to educate our community about what we can be done to prevent sexual assault and how to support the survivors. And whereas anyone can be a leader in preventing and ending sexual violence, as employers, educators, parents, and friends, we all have the obligation to uphold the basic principle that every individual should be free from violence and fear. Now, therefore, I, John Murphy, Mayor of Petoskey, do proclaim April 2023 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month in the city. And that's dated today, it's March 20th, 2023. And I feel proud in that we can read this in the city and that we can identify that we feel that this is still an ongoing problem, if not in the country, but also in our city. And we can all do something, especially to support those that have been assaulted sexually, those that have been assaulted at all. We can do a lot by being their, not just a friend, but a listening ear and a support to them. So thank you very much for allowing us to read this.
Mayor?
Yes.
Quick comment. You missed, I know you didn't mean to, that was requested by our Women's Resource Center.
Yes.
They do such great work in town.
Yes, work with them every year on this to make sure they update what needs to be put in there. And we're very thankful they get it to us in time so that it's read before April. Thanks again, Mr. Wagner. Okay, next is the consent agenda, and that's the city council. I would like to ask that you adopt a resolution that would approve the following consent agenda items. Draft minutes of the March 6, 2023 work session and regular session city council meeting minutes. And I also acknowledge the receipt of a report from the city manager concerning all checks that have been issued since March 6, 2023 for contract and vendor claims of $963,447.93. Intergovernmental claims of $96,965.97, and the March 16th payroll. And the grand total is 1.2 million roughly. Take it to City Council for possible changes, questions, adoptions. Mr. Moore.
I have a single question on page 3 of the check register.
Give us a second.
Shall I defer to you for the question?
I probably have the same question. Please proceed.
Okay.
Right about in the middle of the page, it's power line supply inventory materials. I know it's from the electric fund in the amount of $100,219.16. So my question is really targeted at that item, but I also noticed that throughout the check register, there's more than the usual number of checks drawn from the electric fund. So I wondered, Mr. Horn, if you might clarify for us.
Ask Mr. Horn, please.
So we are preparing for our construction season. So this is inventory of wire for our 2023 projects. This is the bridge, Porter Maple corridor. This is preparing us for that project and the undergrounding of that area. We do have a subject matter expert with us that he can fill in the detail on this specific item if any more detail needs to be had.
I'm good.
Ms. Walker.
As well, thank you.
Is there any other areas of question?
I do have a question, Mayor.
Come on, Dan.
Thousand, could you tell me, Shane, what the burden company is and maybe the contract service?
I am pleased to tell you that maybe you haven't been aware of this, but we are missing hands on this iconic clock behind us. So this group is out of Cincinnati. This is the group we've contracted with. We actually are in receipt of everything we need to put the clock back together. So now we are waiting for more days like today, because we'll need to have a lift, obviously, that gets us up to the clock, put all the clock mechanisms back together. So we are in receipt of everything we need. Now we're just kind of waiting. We'll certainly have it in place before all of our friends and visitors arrive this spring. So
Thank you.
Residents who come. So, Mr. Moore, you have a question.
No, I'm just ready to make a motion. When you're ready for one, so
Yes.
moved.
I'll be happy to second the
I have a
motion.
motion from Mr. Moore, and I have a second from Ms. Walker. Any other discussion? I take it to Ms. Beck.
Demore,
Aye.
Walker.
Yes.
Shields,
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes, motion passes for the consent agenda. Now, this is our public comment time. You have the opportunity to step forward and give us your full name, full address, and address council directly, not the audience, but to direct to us a question or a comment that you wish to share. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak? Is there anybody online that wishes to speak?
None.
No? Okay. I want to make sure.
Here,
Yes.
there's a gentleman in the back of the room.
Come on now. The routine is, for full name, full address.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
John Plickton, 8450 Channel Road.
John, would you hit the microphone button so it turns green on the base of the microphone? Yep, there you go.
John Plickton, 8450 Channel Road, Dasky. Just coming as kind of an ambassador for the affordable housing. We're in the process of working on a project for City Park Grill. And
I just, is this coming up on the discussions?
oh, is it?
Yes.
Yeah,
it's-
so then I get to talk then.
Yes.
Okay, I thought this was the public.
No, that's okay.
I'm headed back.
What I usually say is if there's a comment or a message or something you want with council that is not on the current agenda, come on down. Thank you, John, and we'll see you in about, I hope very soon. Next, we'll go to the city manager's update.
Share.
Thank you, Mayor. A few updates, last week we had our regular planning commission meeting. We just had a single item on our planning commission agenda. That was to hold a public hearing for a preliminary rezoning plan or development for, this is 1420 Standish. This is the former Michigan Maple Block site. I'm pleased to report that planning commission did give unanimous approval. This was conditional. There's a number of things, if you've not read the PUD zoning language, it's a pretty heavy lift for a developer to even reach preliminary approval. So it was conditionally approved, and now the clock starts for the next, they have 90 days to get their final plan submitted, so they know exactly what they need to accomplish within that 90-day period. So tomorrow we'll have our regular downtown management board meeting here at this location at 6 p.m. They will be discussing a redevelopment liquor license for proposed development coming in at 316 East Mitchell Street. And then they'll also be talking about the 2023 facade improvement grants. You won't be able to read these, but I did email these out to you, to the council this afternoon, and Mike and his crew have announced the Bridge Street project. This will be going out. If it didn't go out today, it will go out this week on our social media and website. And then Mike and Jason and his group have already gone door to door, hand delivering letters to residents, kind of talking about the timeline. So we're starting this project on April 3rd. Tentatively proposed to complete maybe mid-July, and obviously that's all weather dependent. So we're excited to kick that project off, and this will be, obviously nothing's easy when you start any underground work, but certainly this will not be as heavy of a lift as we had this past summer. So we're looking forward to getting that project kicked off again on April 3. Also, while everyone's enjoying the sun and the beach, maybe next week we will be starting the Mitchell US 31 kind of improvements. As we make this turn, we'll be doing a number of removals from trees. We'll be relocating our gateway signage, kind of putting in new sidewalks as we make this turn off of 31 onto Mitchell, trying to open up that whole corridor, that view shed, so people can get a great glimpse of our wonderful downtown without obstructions. So this project will get started again next week, starting with some tree removals. So sidewalk work, landscape work. We'll be adding some lighting fixtures and some trees in between lighting fixtures as well, and then relocating our gateway signage to a more prominent spot where you can actually view it instead of being overgrown with trees as it currently is. So this will be starting again as maybe residents are leaving town. We'll have a little bit more access to do some removals without getting bombarded with a lot of traffic on 31. So that work will start next week as well. And I wanted to highlight Sarah, our city clerk. Sarah completed last week her 3rd year of city clerk training and received this wonderful recognition and plaque that, I don't know, Mayor, if you'd like to present to her formally.
I would
In front
love
of everybody.
to.
I think this is
I would love to.
great recognition.
Would you please? Come over here by the flags. So we have the flags in the back. Oh, come on. This is my favorite thing to do. This is quite, I hope we all, let's give her applause for it. All right, here we go. I think it's, you should feel very proud of this. You know, we encourage, I know, city manager and council, we all encourage people to get their game, up their game by education. And you took this 3-year plan. Thank you very much. Again, thank you. Make sure that picture's put on the website, please.
I control that, so. No.
That's why I say you have to do it.
Sarah was always obviously a very professional in her work, but now she is able to achieve the credential of a Michigan professional municipal clerk after this 3-year training cycle. So congratulations, Sarah.
Thanks, Shane.
Any questions for me?
Any questions for city manager on this? Just, okay, does the public have anything they wish to say on this update from the city manager? Okay, there being none. Now we're gonna go to old business, first discussion of proposed ethics ordinance, and I turn it over to Jane as well.
Thank you, Mayor. So we did have a good discussion on this at our last meeting. I know our city attorney made some changes based on your comments. This is obviously an ordinance, so this is on for discussion and first reading. We'll take your comments, any sort of corrections, and make any modifications, and then put this back on for potential second reading and adoption at the, and just as a reminder, I'm reminding myself as well, there will be no first meeting in April. So our next meeting will be April. Anyone? April 17th.
April 7th.
Okay.
We will not be meeting the first Monday of April due to spring break, just to let everybody know. Mr. Moore, you had some questions, I believe, on this.
Yeah, well, first, thank you to city attorney. I'm sure all my colleagues here have noted the changes that were made at our request. But I, on my next read, had just 3 areas of concern for my part. So the first one is under section 26-3, which is the backside of the first page. And that last sentence, I feel is too broad, because as city council members, of course, we have not only the ability to inquire about those matters, but a duty to do so. And so I feel that is too broadly stated there. And were we to discuss that topic, it certainly would not first occur after a resolution and a motion and a second. So that's one area that I think.
Let's address that right now then.
Sure.
You have concerns that, as you say, city council, the mayor has the ability to inquire.
Yeah. I think.
Would you prefer it be worded differently?
Yeah. Yep. I would. And, I would leave that to council to determine the proper wording there. But I just think it's too broad of a statement as drafted. So I give everybody a chance to look at that. Should I go forward or just pause?
Do you have any questions on that discussion on that, council?
Okay.
Okay.
And then the next one is under section 26-5B, which talks about when we need to make disclosures of matters. So essentially it says that whenever the performance of official duties shall require a public servant to deliberate and vote on any matter involving his or her financial or personal interest, that person shall publicly disclose the nature and extent of the interest. All of that is correct. But then it says, and is disqualified from participating. And what I'm saying is that once you disclose, then a determination needs to be made whether or not you're disqualified. You're just not automatically disqualified by disclosing. So,
Right, the group would mutually decide whether it was a conflict of interest or whether the individual can participate in the actual discussion and possible decision.
right. And then 26.8 below A allows us to access an opinion if needed to determine whether or not, in fact, someone said it should be
Which one? I'm
disqualified.
sorry, which one was that? The last one?
26.8A is just another link
Hang on.
where it's at the bottom of the page. There's no change that needs to be made there. I'm just saying that once you put in that a determination has to be made whether or not somebody should be disqualified, if need be, because of that lower section, you then can contact the city attorney for advice if needed. That make sense?
And you may request.
So it's only the B section that I first talked about that
So,
concerned me.
Okay, so my concern is that we've got people on city council calling the city attorney all the time. The clock is running every time you call him. What happens if you call, I call, it's all on the same issue, but yet now we're being charged 5 times for that call, basically. It's because I have concerns about the bills to the city attorney, because I think it's probably more than any other individual contract that we have, whether it be city assessor or whatever. Those are, I don't know what we're paying per hour, but I'm sure it's a big chunk of hourly wages. So I don't know, how do we address that?
Well, I just think the process, I don't know if it needs to be addressed in here, but the process, the one instance I've done this in the past is reach out to the city manager. Is this something that needs to be, do we need to make a request to the attorney about this? Or is this something that you feel is, it could be discussed at the city level? So the first step is just to run it by the city manager for the process.
That would be my step in the process too.
That would eliminate some unnecessary bills from the attorney.
And you could include that in the B section when it's redrafted, like what that process would be.
That sounds good.
Should I go ahead then with the third? Okay. And then the third one is section 26-9. And my suggestion is that the second sentence there just be omitted, because it says the clerk shall also request that each person sign and return an acknowledgement of receipt of a copy of this chapter. Well, it's not mandated that people sign and return it. And the first sentence indicates that she shall deliver, or the clerk shall deliver a copy. So you already have a record that she's going to deliver it. And unless you're going to mandate that everybody sign it, which I think could really be problematical, maybe even from a union perspective, that I would just omit that last sentence, since it doesn't get you anywhere. Those are my comments.
Shane, can you respond to that one?
No, that's fine. Typically, we do have, whether it's personnel policies, handbooks, you don't have to agree with what's inside this document, but you do have to agree that you've received it, and that goes in their employee file just to cover ourselves.
And I would just add, I'm fine with that as long as this is clarified that then people must sign it and return it, because the way it's written right now, it's that the clerk shall request,
Yeah.
but there's no requirement that it be returned. So I'm fine with that also, either way.
Ms. Walker, you signed, I take it you signed it for a handbook with the county,
Oh, yeah, of course.
and you did as well with tip of the mitt. I mean, with the
Correct, yes.
yes,
We're given a certain number of days to turn in the signed document upon
that you
review. Yeah.
that you basically received it, and that way it gives the emphasis that everybody has participated. Yeah,
It's very official.
I'm fine with collecting the signatures on that. I think that's appropriate. Nobody can come back then and say they did not receive it. And that's a big piece of it. The clerk can say, I gave it to him, and you say, I never got it. I think signing it is simply makes it for sure that you did receive it, so. Doctor that as will be. So addressing the last two. What do you want to do with those that you have issues with?
Well, again, if my colleagues on council agree, I would ask that our city attorney take a look at that section 26(3) last sentence to indicate, to modify that sentence to indicate that we certainly can inquire, even have a duty to do so. So it's not drafted the way it is now. And then second of all, 26(5)(b), that he do the same thing to clarify that by disclosure, you're not disqualified. By disclosure, a determination has to be made. And then however everybody wants that to be done.
We do not, those employees are the city manager's hire. And I don't know, is that private from the community to look at what a person's contract is that works for the city? Say a snowplow driver, do you feel you want the right to go in and actually look at their private, the employment status, which contract, which means basically you're going to be looking at what they make, etc. Basically, isn't it?
No, that's not my intention, Mayor.
Okay.
My intention here is it says that the first time that it can be discussed is before the city council with a resolution approving the action that has been moved and seconded. And I think that's a bridge too far. It's, we should have the opportunity, if we wish to inquire about something that the city manager's undertaking before there's a motion, especially when it involves an employee. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not interested in discussing an employee's contract or anything like that. I'm just saying this is so broadly written that a question would be beyond the scope of this.
Shane, can you help us?
I can work with Matt, Attorney Cross to address that language.
That sounds great. And the other, are you all set with the other one then too? Okay. Thank you very much. Anybody else have a discussion on that piece? So this is the first reading. There'll be a second reading and a possible approval at the April 17th.
Well, we may have to go back to first reading at the next one.
You want to go back to first reading?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll do first reading on the 17th of April. I believe it's 17th,
That's right.
which our next meeting, we'll do a first reading, then discussion, and then go to a second meeting, the next meeting, second motion, and etc. Okay. Next is a discussion and possible adoption of a proposed resolution approving the 2023 to 2025 city action plan. I turn it over also again to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So we've talked about this on a number of occasions as well. Certainly open to putting the final touches on this. Appreciate all of your input to get us to this point. Hopefully this reflects the intent of council appropriately.
Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, City Manager Horn, thanks for putting this together and narrowing in scope and simplifying it. I think I appreciate that. I feel like our last special meeting, we were discussing this, it was pretty abbreviated. And so on one hand, I feel like this needs much more discussion. On the other hand, I also see the value of moving this forward and especially the idea that we can revisit this regularly and periodically allows me to say, okay, there's going to be some points here that maybe weren't really fleshed out that I'd like, and I think I'm going to try to be okay with that. Maybe Mayor, can I just dive into a couple questions? Okay. So the downtown development section
Mhm.
and looking at the actions. Where it says, consider specific strategies to increase parking in the downtown area, and then right below it, it says focus is to increase the number of covered parking spaces. My recommendation would used to be, say, consider specific strategies to increase the number of covered parking spaces and optimize downtown on-street parking. Combine that and then don't leave to increase parking in the downtown area as a standalone. I know, I personally think there's a lot of, could be some debate on whether we increase parking in downtown area. I think that it might be a kind of an outdated concept, but I definitely full-heartedly agree that the goal of increasing covered parking spaces is something, is a specific action point for us to take on.
Could you just repeat
So-
what you wanted the language to be? I missed.
Yes. It would be consider specific strategies to increase covered parking spaces and optimize downtown on-street parking options. And so it's kind of combined those two. And I'll continue, when it down a little bit.
So I'm sorry, before you move off that, and then get rid of optimized downtown on-street parking.
That's okay, I'm fine keeping that.
Okay.
Yeah. The fifth point down, work with code enforcement to address blight. Does that include the vacant buildings, the vacancies? Would blight include that?
Yeah,
okay.
that's part of blight.
Yeah, it's part of blight. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Just check that. Back page infrastructure. This is page 1 or 31. Utilize rate studies to predict needs and spread out increases. This is the very last bullet point in the actions. Can you explain that one? I put a question mark that. What is utilize rate studies to predict needs and spread out increases gradually to minimize impact refer to?
So as you look at water, sewer, electric rates, instead of kind of holding on to any sort of rate increases and waiting until the rates are at such a point where now we're into maybe, double-digit rate increases that will be much more painful for most of us to absorb. Looking at rate studies that gradually try to keep up with the cost of inflation, do with that on a regular basis instead of those one-time rate shocks, if you will. So using studies that have gone through, professionals that have helped us put those together, that we're not just pulling numbers out of the sky, but using that methodology to predict what we're going to need, for the future.
Okay, thank you.
And that's what we've used in the past. We've had,
UFS, utility financials.
we've had increases just about every year, but they're minimal compared to coming in with a 12% increase after 6 years.
That's correct.
And it's comes a program that comes out and it has been pretty reliable to this point, very accurate.
Awesome, great. Thanks for that clarification on that.
In there.
I can't find it.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Okay. So staying under infrastructure and referencing Ms. Walker's suggestion from our last meeting that relevant boards and commissions be added to the key team members, since planning commission is referenced under actions, I would think they should be added to key team members there. And then I wondered too, I guess we don't yet have an arts commission. I didn't know if that should be, if we're going forward with that, if that should be added to parks and public spaces. Was a question.
As key team members?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And then I had a question under economic development. Maybe I missed this last time, because I know we talked about exploring, we have quite a bit of discussion around exploring community development department head position. But do we also talk about explore development of an appointed economic development commission? If so, I don't remember that. So I'm just curious what it is. It's the last one under economic development.
I,
I think under economic development, we have groups that we work with, whether it be through the Housing North, whether it be through North,
No, this is an appointed economic development commission.
I don't know, and maybe Councilmember Shields can chime in, but I will say that my previous stop, we did have an appointed economic development commission that I found very helpful. Might be something for us to consider here as another appointed board or commission to try to address some economic development related concerns, issues.
May I just jump in?
Sure,
I found interesting that my previous references for a similar commission was for sustainability and having a sustainability commission. But I like the idea of this potentially too. But my previous comments were on sustainability.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
So I'm not in favor or opposed. I just wasn't sure what it was. So, and then one final thing, I know Ms. Walker and I respectfully disagreed last time about the inclusion of our contracted partners. And I thought the consensus we reached was not to leave those in, and I see that they are left in. So I'm just looking for clarity on that. That would be, our contracted partners. I only say that because contracts change and otherwise all these key team members are inherent in-house, members of the city.
and key contract members could change as these action plan items are addressed as well. So I think it would have to be very, very broad or just left off.
Okay. Just so I'm
Not to minimize the contract and the people we work with, but we may well get in new contract people that aren't even on these lists now when we start addressing action plans. So we just know, we know that that's going to be a part of it. But I don't care. It's up to you guys.
Well, when we walked away from the last meeting, we pretty much came to a decision as a group that it would just be like in-house staff as well as appointed positions. And that's fine.
Mhm. Okay,
Because that opens up the possibility, especially with the idea of an economic development commission, to include those people in the community that would NLEA, the chamber that are working on economic development, they would be part of that commission or whatever.
Mhm. I think that needs to be determined.
Yeah.
Boards and commissions basically are normally city
Mhm.
residents. Are we talking of going outside for those people? Or
I
are
don't
we
know.
talking of city residents on our boards and commission? Because that's normally what we have is both our boards and commissions for the most part are city residents. Mr. Wagner? Any ideas?
No. I think the consensus was leave, at least on the key team members, to leave them on.
Okay, okay.
And just for the sake of clarity for myself, I will, for now, unless I hear otherwise, I'll remove, and I apologize for misrepresenting that.
Fine.
Economic development, that last item, I'll remove that. And what do I need to put? Something similar to sustainability? Is that what
Well, that was what I was going to bring up.
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so that I was wanting to add, explore development of an appointed sustainability commission is an action item that I've proposed. I don't know how well that's been discussed here.
I think there's difference between economic development and sustainability.
Oh, but maybe not.
If I can expound on that a little bit more there.
Economic development means, yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, this was, I think, driven by the objective, which says continue to pursue a goal of achieving 100% renewable energy by 2035. And then you have actions, but you have an objective, you have actions, we have no plan. So it's just kind of actions without a plan be scattered and not focused on really achieving that objective. The whole plan can help us better aim towards that objective. And a plan I feel like would be best developed with a partnership of staff and community members, thus a commission. That's why I'm recommending that as an action.
There is working with Michigan Public Power Agency, MPPA.
Yep.
There's the MML Gold Communities Challenge, net metering. There's a lot of things listed there that would be what you talk of as far as sustainability. Those are the actions that go with that objective of sustainability. So help me out, help me understand where we're coming from.
Yeah, I'm coming from that. We don't have here's our plan for 2035. Here's our action steps laid out. We have partners that will work with MPPA as a key partner for sure. We have some benchmarks that we try to hit with Michigan Green Communities, but actually defining how we're going to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2035.
There is already a percentage.
There's percentage targets, yeah.
There's percentage targets already out there, and these will help us reach those targets. I mean, help me understand what's not there.
I can.
Thank you.
Ms. Walker.
To share a little bit. I think in our thinking around committee, an appointed committee of residents, engaging them. I mean, getting to 100% renewable energy by 2035 is a really heavy lift. And how will we get there? And what are the means and opportunities for our community to engage in that? And I think there's enough interest with people in the renewable energy sector and people that are interested in our Green Volunteer Program, the renewable energy goals, and a lot of these other action items. Similar to forming an arts commission, you're building capacity to get to this goal of 100% renewable energy by 2035. And so I see it as another opportunity to engage citizens in that opportunity. Of course, it would be something similar to the Arts Commission appointed by the mayor and then serving as a committee for who knows how much time. But I can see the value of something like that. And I think that's, forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn, Derek, because I think that's kind of like the idea or the concept about why to have an appointed committee for sustainability, just because of that really heavy lift of 100% renewable energy by 2035.
I will just say, and obviously, again, Mike is our expert here. Our partners at MPPA they speak for us. They're out there scouring opportunities for us to get into large scale, sustainable projects, and not to diminish any of the local stuff that we do, because we certainly want to be a partner in the small scale stuff as well. But to get that bang for our dollar, we need our partners at MPPA. We need to lean on them for projects that look inside the state for us to do large scale, whether it's solar arrays or what have you, that we can do and get the best return on our investment that we possibly can. And so we'll continue to work very closely with MPPA, obviously, and look at those opportunities to get to our goal by 2035.
And that's a great point there. MPPA is very valuable, and they are a huge part of us getting to 2035. But that is my concern, that we rely too much on MPPA, and that there isn't the local knowledge and the local support that I feel like engaging the local community in that goal can help achieve us get to that lofty goal beyond what if we need the local and MPPA. And so I actually have concerns of relying just on MPPA.
Mayor, if I may.
Please.
And MPPA really does represent that large scale centralized. I think the idea of a committee or a smaller scale would be like the decentralized. And you need an all of the above strategy. So how do you mobilize the decentralized, very small scale, which also could go to like public utility scale on our buildings, on public buildings here, and then some kind of regional, but also then MPPA could get involved in the regional and then the very large scale picture. So I see them as like at the top echelon and like the grassroots organizing of the decentralized systems with people and city council and or perhaps a proposed commission.
Mr. Moore.
So when I look at this list of actions, that's kind of my understanding of what the plan is. And we started with, I think it was like 3 or 4 pages of goals. And that's why we tried to narrow it down. So, because we weren't kind of achieving things because there was so much. So I mean this most respectfully, but if we bring in more voices, would those voices be directed solely to these actions we've identified? Because I also think that there's a possibility when you bring in more voices, and I do mean this most respectfully, that they come up with maybe a whole lot of ideas that are not in these actions that we've delineated and parsed down.
And thank you, and
Mr. Shields.
thank you, Mayor. And I would say hopefully resoundingly, yes, I think that is sustainability is throughout our livable Petoskey master plan. And so I see that the renewable energy goal would be one charge of that commission, but also, looking at protecting our bay with GSI, Green Stormwater Initiatives. This is a community that, as Ms. Walker said, there's a lot of support for this initiative in our community. We have the highest percentage of the voluntary green, or more high percentage of the voluntary green pricing program than Traverse City does. So it's just a community that recognizes the value of supporting sustainability, and also community engagement. So this seems like a win-win here to also help, as Ms. Walker said, all of the above scenario of how we achieve our goals. And while these are actions, if you look at strategic planning, they're much more detailed than just these actions. It's how to get them, timelines, and looking at partners, looking at who do we engage. There's a lot more details that I think could be fleshed out, but staff alone doesn't have time for that. But if there was a group of citizens that were charged with that challenge,
I see everything taking up more staff time to do this is the problem than to work on the goals and objectives of the actions that we have identified here. In 2 years, this is a heck of a lot of a load of things to accomplish. Perhaps you could set up a forum where you could meet with people in your wards and talk about what would be something they could do to support it. I just hate to put another layer on there, but
yeah, I recognize that the burden on staff, and appreciate that. So
it will be a burden on staff.
Absolutely.
Any committee that we have requires staff attendance, staff doing the minutes, staff sending the agendas, staff coordinating it. I just feel that we've already given the action plans of saying, here's what we want you to work on this year. If you want to start another thing, then we need to eliminate some of that stuff there.
I appreciate that, Mayor. And so I'll not maybe ask to have it put on right now, but
I agree it's good down the road, but I think what we've done is we're going to overwhelm staff as the city manager and the department heads. But this is a lot to do right here, right now. Next year, let's look at taking something that's maybe been accomplished or two and adding something like that on the list. But it would be, I just see we've got a lot on this list here.
yeah, well, thank you. I just urge us to.
I think it's a great idea.
And I also invite the public to express their voice. So if this is in fact something the community would desire, show us.
Mr. Wagner.
Thanks, Mayor, and everybody's comments. I'm glad you said about staff, because my thought was always sensitive to staff time. And I know running the meetings, they've got a lot of meetings they're running on a regular basis. And, I would let staff kick back on that too. But I also, with some admiration for Lindsay's personal advocacy for these goals in the community all the time, yours with community capital and what you're doing. I'd love to see, a larger effort, some kind of a grassroots effort. I think it's worth it. We talked about circular economy and doing some education and getting the community more involved in that. So without adding a commission, I would endorse, whatever it's going to take to do more in that regard.
Ms. Walker.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor. And just to answer kind of what Tina's question was like, would that mean like more stuff adding to the plate? But this is really a nice little template of like, here's what the city has defined as our goals and objectives. And if there was, that grassroots organizing around a commission, or just maybe we know who those people are that would be the potential candidates for wanting to sit on a sustainability commission, and we could continue to organize with them. And when MPPA is here doing their presentation in the next few months, making sure that those residents are turning out to be engaged in those conversations, because there's plenty of opportunities for citizen engagement. It's just like, what does that look like, and in a formalized way? And so maybe we don't have a sustainability commission this year or next year, but maybe that'll something that'll come out organically of these actions and the action items that the city has identified.
And you can always get individual involvement to show up to meetings when we do discuss this stuff. And I see this room is we have 10 times more seats than we have people participating when we start talking about whether it be affordable housing, sustainability on economics, or sustainability of energies. I see very minimal people showing up for this. But if you guys could get more people here that raise their hands and give us some ideas of what they want, that would be great. Mr. Wagner.
Thanks, Mayor. I actually came here intending tonight to say thank you to Shane and the city for making this so much more consolidated and clear than it's been since I've been around, and understanding there's going to be change. It's really come a long way in a short amount of time. So thank you for that. I'm going to make
Can we make a motion on this for possible change with the changes, or do we need to bring it back?
It's minimal. This is not an ordinance. I think we can do it with, we'll just say changes. I've got the changes. The clerk's got the changes.
Okay. So let the changes discussed, and knowing there can still be more discussion and input tonight.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve. Very good. This with the changes.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion from Mr. Wagner and a second from Mr. Shields. Any other discussion, council? There being
just
Mr. Shields.
the attainable housing. Oops, I said that. It says affordable housing. I said attainable housing. Maybe that's it. The planning commission for key team members. They're key on the zoning. Wait. So it says the housing priority. Key team members, planning commissions they're just recognize them for the hard work they're doing, putting in, reviewing the zoning. That's one of the action items.
Okay.
Thank you. That's it for me.
So, Mr. Wagner, are you okay with the changes that were requested?
I am. Thanks.
This person that seconded, Mr. Shields, are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? Public wish to weigh in on this action plan 2023 to 2025. If there being none online, I go to city clerk Beck for roll.
Wagner.
Yes.
Shields.
Yes.
Demore. Aye. Walker.
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes. Thank you, council. I think it's good that we have discussions. I think we carve stuff up and we go slow. We get it right though, Next is new business adoption of a proposed resolution accepting the Community Energy Management Program grant agreement provided by the Michigan Department of Environment Great Lakes and Energy, the Eagle, for winter sports park improvements. I turn that over to City Manager Shane.
Here, before we address this item, could I get a little grace? And I apologize. I brought or had Mike Robbins attend tonight. My few comments on my city manager report on construction projects. I wanted Mike to be available to answer your questions, and I just kind of glanced over that. So if you don't mind, could we go back to those two projects, and I'll just open the floor to council. If you have questions of Mike while he's here on the Bridge Street project, on the Mitchell 31 project, certainly Mike is available to answer or clear up any questions.
Does anybody have questions regarding it? Mr. Moore?
Just one. Over in that area, do we have any of our cement step situations in the right of way and like we did on Lake Street? Do you
There are
know?
four.
There are.
There are two in the full reconstruct section of bridge. And we've talked to the owners and there are no issues. There's a third on Porter Street and Maple corner. I've talked to that gentleman and there's no issues. There's a fourth that is in a mill and fill section that we're going to meet with the owner on that particular, but no, there's no issues.
Thanks so much.
That have been identified.
Okay.
Thanks for being on top of that. Appreciate it very much.
Mr. Wagner?
Thank you. Thanks.
Yep.
2 weeks ago, I think, or whenever we talked about this, I told you I knew some folks at the Bridge Church on Bridge Street because there's nobody there full time. So I went and found the history. The property was sold to the Family of Christ Church for $1 years ago. And so I contacted the Family of Christ Church, the Nehemiah House, Brian Peters, who's now there, and he had already received the letters and was well informed. Big Water Creative Arts, my friends there who store instruments in the Bridge Church. And I think I've covered everybody now. And so they're all good.
Good. And we did reach out to the church and talk to Roy Angel today, the pastor. And we've got the times and dates that they need access and we'll work with them. I'll make sure that happens.
Is there a way to somehow do parking when it comes through there? Because it seems like there's times when that church is utilized that it's single lane. There's nothing we can really do.
We're putting it based on the width of the bridge deck. We're coming around that corner with the same width that's there today.
Okay.
So maybe posting maybe would alleviate some of that.
Stay back.
But that would be public safety to look at that.
Okay. Sidewalk, will there be more sidewalks or equal sidewalks?
Equal sidewalks. Actually, I shouldn't say that.
On the corner north on Bridge Street on the north.
You got it.
Yeah.
The last
There's actual the sidewalk ends and then there's guardrail that begins so people walk out into the street, or there's a little dirt path that will be continuous sidewalk with this project.
There are two houses, one or two houses there that do not have sidewalks in the front of them on north on Bridge Street.
It'll be full sidewalk.
There will be. Very good.
Yeah. I don't know where those gaps are off the top of my head, but
First house, it's the first house after the Riverview Terrace going east.
I know.
John Thurman rental. I know that.
yeah, we're gonna fill that. It'll be a continuous sidewalk from Franklin to the Riverview Terrace, which will tie right into the Bridge Street Bridge.
I think that's fantastic. I see people walking there a lot. And
I think we're talking about the same chunk. That, yeah.
Basically, there'll be sidewalks out both sides of Bridge Street, period.
Correct.
And has to cross by the church to get to the
Correct. You
sidewalk.
cross at the church to get to the Riverview Terrace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Any other questions regarding Bridge Street or 31?
Yeah, it's the Mitchell Street entrance. Realigning some things there with street lighting. Sidewalks going to be realigned.
The planning commission already looked at this, didn't they?
Yeah, yes.
It's already been.
DMB.
Yes.
They're pretty much the drivers.
Yes, they've all had their opportunity to weigh in on this.
Are those trees useful and all those trees are gonna be removed? Is it like blue spruce or are they Norway spruce or something?
There's 3 trees and they're pretty large. And if you take one down, you're going to see one side of the others that's not gonna look right. So those three,
Useful, I mean, can they be used for anything other than
not that I'm
like
aware of.
chipper, mulch? Is
Chip,
that it?
mulch,
Okay,
yeah,
to the cogen facility.
yeah, that's right.
Anybody need a one-sided Christmas tree in their yard, they can probably work with Mike and he'll let you dig it out or something.
Yeah.
Anything else, Mike, that we
Just
can know about?
real quick on the Mitchell Street, there's gonna be a lot of things happening there from a utility standpoint, from a removal standpoint to a replacement standpoint. So there's multiple crews. We're gonna use city crews for the water and the electric to relocate the light poles. We have water investigations to perform because we're putting new landscapings with new sign placements, and there's a ductile iron water main underneath that segment with some old services from the houses that were torn down by the video club. So we're gonna be in there with a lot's going on in a small postage stamp area.
Mhm.
So during the week of spring break, we're gonna just do the removals on the trees, so we don't have to disrupt any flows to traffic coming into the central business district. But
It's nice that you are still here working with the city because I feel full confidence. I know the staff does as well on your job, of what you do and how you do it. So thank you. Mr. Moore.
So I can't remember if I was sitting in the audience before I was elected or if I was sitting up here, and I remember there were some discussions around this project and then the adjacent, condo project that may be underway.
Yeah.
So are we fine with going ahead with this? Is there going to have to be any redos when and if that moves forward? That was a very amorphous question, but
no, I can answer the question. We have reached out to the developer and the architect for that project, and I'm not sure what their timeline is to proceed. We did talk to them about grades so that when we put the new sidewalk through, that if we could help with that, there is one egress door entry that's on that north side of that building as designed today, and they can make it fit our sidewalk. The bad news, in my opinion, is that that sidewalk will probably be jeopardized if that building project does proceed at some point, which in the scheme of things, it's not a lot as far as being sacrificial for the sidewalk. But when you're building a building pretty close to the edge of the right of way with that sidewalk, but it's time for us to get the project complete and not just continue to postpone. So I think the driver was the DMB and try to get the project moving. So we have reached out to the developer and to the architect. They're very well aware of what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay.
thank you.
Anyone else, council? Thank you, Mike, for the update.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Sorry about that.
Now we're going back to the adoption of
yeah.
proposed resolution accepting the community energy management, and I'll turn that over to Dave.
Thank you, Mayor. This would be very easy. This probably could have been a consent item, but we always want to celebrate when we receive grants. So this is a $20,000 grant from Eagle through their Community Energy Management Grant Program to support our Winter Sports Park window and door project. So there's no match involved with this $20,000. So this is a resolution accepting the terms, and then obviously, again, no match associated with this one. So it's fairly straightforward.
Ms. Demore.
Our budget is 75. We may not have to expend that full amount. So yes.
Thank you.
I make motion to approve the agreement as written.
Support.
I have a motion from Mr. Shields and I have a second from Mr. Wagner. Any other discussion, council? Public wish to make any comments on this? There being none, I go to city clerk back for roll.
Shields.
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Demore.
Aye.
Walker.
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes, motion passes unanimously 5-0. Next is the adoption of proposed resolutions to submit to the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Northern Eagle, the Brownfield redevelopment grant and loan proposal for the Michigan Maple Block project. I turn this also over to Shane Horn.
Thank you, Mayor. So we, as staff, have been working with the developer and his team really going back to August of last year on this project. So as you know, this is a multifaceted project. It's a project from a brownfield standpoint that needs a lot of assistance. And so this would help us to move forward with demolition, environmental cleanup. They're also exploring funds from the land bank to potentially assist with this project from a cleanup standpoint. So it's a significant lift environmentally. Just demolishing the structure is a significant endeavor just in and of itself. And then you have all the environmental. We've supported this project. The city has supported this project. We've used RRC pre-development dollars to help with some of the environmental costs. Obviously, we've reached a point where this is kind of the first step in the process. This is a proposal. So this is nothing's finalized yet. This essentially just authorizes the submittal of a proposal to Eagle. This is a little different in that it's obviously the grant is, again, probably likely a no-brainer. This is pretty straightforward. We make requests for grant funds all the time. And so that's pretty significant or pretty straightforward. We do that quite often. This is a little different in that there's also a loan component of this. The terms are very attractive. As you can see listed there, interest rate 1.5%. The 15-year payback, it's first 5 years interest free. We can pay the loan back through our TIF through the brownfield. So there's certainly some attractive components to a loan. However, and I'm very clear here, this is a loan. And so it's a little different mechanism than one we've anticipated or what we've used before. So, and I've expressed that concern to the developer, to Matt individually. But obviously that's, I wanted it to come before you with both the grant and the loan aspect, and this body can decide how it wants to proceed on the loan piece. Again, this is just a proposal at this point. We would get back, or Eagle would get back with us on an actual award that would go through, and a resolution would be compiled. We'd have a development agreement that would dictate all of the legal aspects of what we would be needing to do. This is just, again, to get us into their system at this point. But I want to be very clear about the loan piece of it. Mac is here. We've all worked with Mac in the past as kind of a partner. I want to be clear with Mac as well. I'm sure he'll disclose it himself, but Mac is working directly with the developer on this particular piece. So he's recused himself on the county's brownfield authority, and the county is using a contractual consultant to review brownfield associated with this particular project, which we will likely also do the same. So Mac is here if you've got questions, or Mac, if you want to run through the highlights of it as well to hit the points where you want to hit, and then we'll open it up for council.
Yeah, please.
Well, that was an outstanding summary. I don't have a whole lot after that. Shane said this is
Shane said this is a two-part process, really, with a proposal that is prepared and in your packet. And Eagle evaluates that proposal and says, yes, we like the project. It fits in with our parameters. We have some dollars available. We'll set aside those dollars with this approval and then ask you to submit an application. And that application, that next step, is where the commitments would come into play, where there would be an access agreement, which we already have. There would be a letter from the chief executive officer supporting the project. And if there was a loan, There's a resolution that would have to be adopted by the city council in that case, securing that loan and saying that, commitment to repay the loan and to commit other sources of funding, including revenue sharing, to pay that loan. I've also suggested we add in Shane's compensation and also firstborn there to that whole situation, so that we're covering that in that area. It's too old. We don't born either, so no problems there. I totally understand the concern and the issue that raises. I mean, you pass a resolution that says, hey, we're going to devote future revenue sharing. Holy moly, to that, especially on development projects where things happen. And so, what we've done, and by the way, I've done 11 loans. I represented 9 communities for 11 different loans. I've also done 5 others on the private side. So, have some experience in this area. And we have a major project in Marquette that we're doing right now with the same situation. And so what we've kind of suggested in that development agreement is really where you provide all the security that developer has to provide the security, so you'll never get into that situation where you can't repay the loan in kind of a couple of levels.
What's our loan amount?
The maximum would be $1 million. And so
that could be utilized, paid for through TIF money.
Exactly.
Studying up a tax.
I should highlight that is that really what you want in that agreement is you want this Eagle loan to be in first position for all the TIF dollars that happen. So that is going to be paid off. And let's say simple math, 10-year loan, $1 million, 1.5 interest, but it's about $100,000 a year, that you would have rights to the first $100,000 through that brownfield plan. So you have that locked in the development agreement. But there always is a risk, that those dollars are paid out. They're early dollars, that are paid out for environmental work and demolition if that project doesn't move forward. And so I'd suggest, and we've done this with the other communities, is include a contractual obligation to repay that loan. So that's the first kind of level. That in the development agreement, there's a clause that says any difference between the TIF dollars that are generated and the loan amount, the developer is obligated to pay. Contractual obligation. Okay, doesn't have any backing, but that's a contractual obligation that can go to court. And I've had 2 circumstances where that has happened, and the developer writes a check every year that makes that happen. One project did move forward, and another project that didn't have enough revenues to pay that off. So, but contractual obligations are only worth the paper they're written on, as some attorneys would say. And so the next step or next level is a personal guarantee from the co-signers of that loan. And again, personal guarantees are not all that easy to get back to. So that's a concern as well for you. But at least you have 2 layers of guarantees. And I will say, Great Lakes Capital is a very large company. They've got millions and millions of dollars, in assets and those kinds of things. It's not kind of a fly-by-night group. So there's that to consider, I think. The third thing, and sort of the main backup, is to make certain that you'll have those TIF revenues. And so again, this is not necessarily to this issue, but I want to address that important issue. Is that you don't pay out any of those TIF revenues. You don't pay out any of those loan dollars. So you don't have an obligation to pay it back until there's imminent development that would generate the amount of TIF that's available. So you could either do it kind of in the first position. It could be you have bank financing, you have construction contracts, you have all the permits in place, you're underway or whatever. That could be, one circumstance. The worst case scenario from the developer's perspective is that they build up they go ahead and build everything. And then the assessor says, yeah, we're going to be at $100,000 of TIF revenue. Okay, now you can write the check. So all those things would be in a situation where the city, believe me, I don't want to put the city in a bad position. I've got to live here and be with you, for a long time. But that would be kind of that protection. That would say you wouldn't have to disperse those funds until you know that the revenues are going to be there. In this case, what we'd like to do, because there's some things that you want to look at, that happen. I would like to request that we include that loan in this package. And that we work over after they evaluate, it takes them about 30 days to evaluate. And then they'll say, okay, we invite an application. We have 60 days from that point in time to do all the work. That we start that initiation, we look at the development agreement and chew all of those items up. If at that time you're still not satisfied, we could say, we'll take the grant, but we can't deal with the loan. And that's happening in other communities. I certainly understand that.
So what other, so how long are you talking of 10 years?
Yeah, there's no principal or interest for 5 years
Right,
after that, and then a 10-year payback period,
so it's 15 years
total of 15-year term, right?
for a mill, A million.
To $1 million. Yep.
And will they come back for any more monies?
That's all
On
that's
this
available.
application?
No, that's all that's available. That's all that's available in this grant.
Yeah,
This
I just
project,
need to hear you say that.
yeah, sure. I was gonna tell
You know, this process, but I want you to say it's.
Now, in addition, they're applying for some missing middle dollars for Michigan. We're gonna apply for Land Bank Authority blight elimination dollars for the demolition. And that would reduce the amount of dollars in that loan, because this just kind of takes the loan. There also are some environmental issues that we're trying to work through. We have another investigation that's proceeding with the support of RRC that is trying to determine whether we have to have vapor mitigation in all the buildings or just a portion of the buildings where the contamination is. Kind of examining the rest of that contamination. So all of those would pull back on these numbers a little bit, and we'd use the grant first. So I think this is a project that it appears, just with the challenges and the challenge to try and hit that target market of the missing middle, there's, pretty much all the dollars are going to have to come. Now, we'll also say for the brownfield plan and for what we have to do for the state tax capture approval for that, which is critical to this. And then any dollars that they ask for MEDC, they have to provide a full pro forma of all the sources and uses, all of the revenues. So there's public documentation that says here exactly is the whole financing of the project. Here's how it all works. And here's the gap that we're asking for MEDC or for brownfield TIF. So you'll have an idea, you'll have that arrangement to say, here's how all these finances work, including the Eagle grant and including the.
What is anticipated tax collection yearly on that piece of property when it is fully built as it is then?
Might be able to grab that, but it's bootloads.
I know, but
$70 million project, 35, if we say $35 million of taxable value. In that case, I believe that's 1.7 million or so annually in taxes. Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't say that on record, but that's
fine if you're saying that on record.
I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. Yeah, but I mean, that's just a quick guess.
But that means that for our collection and when this thing is built in say 5 years.
Yes.
It's fully built.
Yep.
We will be collecting well over the 100,000 that we would be turning over as a part of this process.
Yeah, no question. I mean, there might be some other obligations, but really, if we solve the environmental issue with the Eagle grant and the demolition with the grant, there's that really reduces the obligation on that brownfield TIF, and then that balance for the loan, would be there. And so, that all that built out TIF, all that built out revenue, would be able to come back. And again, we're leveraging city dollars are about 28%, I think, of the total tax bill. So leveraging the state dollars, leveraging all that dollars for that repayment.
So about 28% of the yearly tax revenue brought in once it's built in 5 years, say 28% will be turned over to.
That's right.
As a part of it. And we would basically gather roughly 72% of the taxes that are paid at Maple Block will come into the general fund for Petoskey.
No, you're leveraging those other dollars for repayment of brownfield eligible activities.
Okay.
Once those obligations are met, then it's distributed just like all of the tax bills that happen. So the 28% or so that represents the city's millage rate, along with the school operating, all the other county, all the other millages.
Okay.
That's the revenues that you would ultimately receive to the general fund, is your pro rata share of the millage rates.
Yeah, okay.
But the advantage of the brownfield activity that helps the project move forward is you're leveraging all these other funds that are supporting. It's not an obligation just on the city, it's the obligation of all parties.
Would there be any change if I see the state is in the committee right now? Looking at brownfield to be able to be used for housing.
Yes, we
Would
spent
that affect this thing?
No, not the loan. Those are not, would not be eligible activities under the grant, under the Eagle grant or the loan.
Okay,
There may be a possibility, and again, we'd have to come back and show you that that would be necessary. Is that there may be a possibility with the passage of this act that adds housing assistance activities.
right,
To brownfield eligible activities.
right.
And so we may be able to take the gap, let's say there's, you know, a $200,000 cost, or somebody can afford $200,000, the cost is $250. You can take that $50, still have to come up with the money somehow to pay the contractors and everybody, but you take that $50,000. And then that's an eligible activity that's paid out through brownfield TIF over time.
Okay,
So that may be part of the mix on this project, but that we'll look at that within the brownfield plan.
and that would then assist the city financially.
Ultimately, once that's paid off, I mean, those city taxes would be captured to pay that cost.
Yeah.
But you'd be supporting that missing middle, those housing costs.
But you're saying it would be 15 years before we would basically be collecting all the taxes and they would be distributed to other interagencies, et cetera.
Yeah, just for clarification, we don't know exactly because we've got all these other grants, how long that brownfield TIF is gonna be. If we're able to chip away all the dollars with these grants, then that period of time would be reduced. The loan may pay back over 15 years, but it may be that there's no other obligations for those brownfield TIF. So just $100,000 of that would go towards, and the other nine, the other balance of those dollars could go back to the taxing entities if there's not an obligation for the brownfield.
Are you saying that we may have more identified for brownfield that we will have to come up with through tax dollars?
Yeah, there may be a portion of the dollars that none of those activities, in a worst case scenario.
How much is that?
I don't know that yet.
I know, but you're asking us to support a loan, but yet we don't know if this loan, we support this loan and then it turns around where we've got to shell out more money that nobody knows about right now for the brownfield. What about that?
In this case, just for the loan, you'll be in first position to pay back that loan.
I
And you have
understand.
a subsequent decision to make with concurring with the brownfield plan
Yeah,
as to whether you want those items included or not.
and if they aren't, are you gonna pick them up or through the state?
Yeah, that's
or-
my personal guarantee.
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering, how is that brownfield that could add another $50,000 or $80,000 a year of that payoff? How is that gonna be chunked? That's gonna take another big chunk out of our taxes revenue from that place, right?
Well, I mean, like I said, there'll be pretty substantial taxes generated, so
I
I think
understand.
all those costs would be paid off.
I understand,
And
but
you can make that decision within the brownfield plan.
I know, but just gonna shoot this whole project down when it's at the doorstep, and then we're the ones that say no because it's costing the city more than what we feel comfortable with. So what do you think the brownfield cost to the city might be?
The total eligible activities, I mean, I don't know that number
Okay,
just yet. I haven't added all these up with all of those kind of pieces,
okay,
but it could be a couple $1 million that are over and above the eligible activities that are included.
so that would mean that the city would end up having to take taxes collected from that project when it's complete and maybe not just refund $1 million, but a couple more $1 million.
Yes, you would only find 28% of those eligible activities. There's a possibility. Like I said,
Percent of 2 million is 56,000, 5 point,
yeah, it's very true, but I mean, it's also that question through the pro forma that says, hey, it's got to be justified. If it can't be justified, then you can look at that and say, look, you don't need this money, so we're not going to do it. If you need this money to get a reasonable return on investment, we can't do the project without this last piece.
I understand, but we don't want to be the ones to shoot the arrow through the project simply because we feel that it's we're committing too much funds to it. I don't know, council, how do you feel? Mr. Wagner?
Thanks, Mayor. My understanding is all we're doing is approving this to go to Eagles, so it could be then considered as part of a plan. And then the plan will come back and that's when we can have this much deeper discussion. My feeling is there's way too many unknowns Until a plan.
There's too many unknowns to say, well, we're this much, we're on the hook for a million.
We haven't received anything. We're just submitting approval.
Yeah, but what's on the table tonight is just authorizing the city manager to apply for the grant and the loan.
I understand.
And if I may, Mayor,
Yes.
this is kind of uncomfortable thing that's required with complex, wicked issues that the housing crisis is. And so, yes, I hear, I appreciate what your questions and concerns you're raising, Mayor. I feel like at this point, although it's uncomfortable to move forward, I support moving forward with learning more. That's, I see this as.
I didn't say I didn't support this. I said I have
Speak
questions.
for myself, yes.
I have questions. Yeah, what it is. Mr. Moore.
So first of all, I absolutely support this project. Second of all, absolutely support the grant. Third of all, have huge concerns about the city of Petoskey being a guarantor of a $1 million loan and carrying the full risk of this project, particularly when we're looking at a contractual guarantee with no backing, which means it would have to be litigated, a personal guarantee, which would have to be litigated. And my question to you, just out of curiosity, are there any other local entities that could be the guarantor on this project? Emmett County, Brownfield,
The Brownfield Authority.
have either of them been proposed to be the guarantor on this project?
Yes,
And their response?
they were not interested.
Because. I mean, they're gonna gain taxes out of this project.
No, it's the same, I mean, it's the same concern or that same issue, that they weren't interested in moving forward on the loan. And like I said, I mean, you guys may have that same concern and consideration. I guess that, again, what we're asking for is to be, they win the lottery without buying a ticket. So let's put the ticket in, see what happens, and then you have a decision to make with a resolution, as to whether you accept that loan or not.
I don't mind buying a ticket, but I want to know that I'm not gonna have to pay more for that ticket in the future. Later on.
Yeah, you don't have
I
to.
don't want a surprise.
Yeah, and you don't have to know. And we also understood, and I think we included, some comment about that, is that we want to come back with sort of the full picture of all of these, kind of costs. It still is really a fluid thing, and that's why I can't quite say everything. We don't have all the data and information, but we're going to have a lot more here shortly. And so I'd like to come back, in the meantime, sometime, April or May or whatever that is, and just kind of give you a full picture of all the incentives, all the gaps, all those kinds of pieces that would help at least solidify. I mean, let's provide a more global picture. So.
Okay. Mr. Moore.
So this is intended as a respectful question, but many times in these projects, developers ask for the most that they can get. Do these developers need the $1 million loan?
Yeah, I would say that they probably have financing that's available potentially, but it goes from 6-7% now with, immediate terms to a loan that is 1.5% with no principal or interest for 5 years. It's pretty attractive financing and will reduce the overall cost of the project. So.
And I very much respect that, but we're bearing the risk of that for the developer to have that benefit.
And I believe through the projects that I've been involved with representing municipalities, that there can be protections put in place that would satisfy that concern. So you wouldn't be in that situation.
Okay. And those would be addressed.
That would be in the development agreement that you would approve before you pass the resolution accepting the loan.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't have a problem at this point.
Okay, Mayor, then I'll make a motion to authorize the submittal of an Eagle Brownfield grant and loan.
And sorry, I drafted that resolution a little differently than I normally would. So if you look at page 39, the last now therefore, obviously the first one is just the grant, but the second now therefore is an accept/deny. So as you make the motion, I would just make it whichever one you choose.
Okay, Make the motion that the Petoskey City Council by this action hereby accepts the submission of a proposal for a Eagle Brownfield loan for up to 1.11 million that can be combined with a Brownfield TIF plan for capture repayment.
Support.
A motion from Mr. Shields, second from Mr. Wagner. Any other discussion, council? Public wish to weigh in on this? So being none, I take it to Sarah Beck for roll.
Shields,
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Demore,
Aye.
Walker,
Yes.
Murphy.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
See you in a month or two.
Thanks.
Next is discussion possible action on City Park Grill rental rehab support initiatives. I turn this also over. I see it's a possible action, but it is not a adoption, correct?
That's up to council if you want to adopt anything or not.
Okay.
I just left it kind of generic because I wasn't sure where this discussion would lead.
Gotcha.
Obviously, we have been working with the ownership group of City Park Grill, putting together a rental rehab through MEDC and CDBG. We, as the city, are the applicant. We, as the city, would be the fiduciary. We would receive the grant funds. We would distribute those grant funds through draws through the contract. So we certainly have a big stake in this project as well. However, this is not, as we just talked about, this is not a tax incentive project at this point. We did go out for bid. We received one bidder. The bidder is here with us tonight. I'm sure we'll speak on this as well. The bid came back about 200,000 higher than what the budget was proposed for. So I have been working with Bob and Dick to try to determine how we can make this a viable project going forward. This is certainly a project that I think we all desire to see. We want to see more reuse, redevelopment of our second and third floors in our central business district. We just think that's a great use of that opportunity. So we would certainly want to encourage and support that when and if at all possible. So we were just kind of scratching our heads trying to determine, how can we move this project down the tracks, if you will, because the owners have reached a point where they're not sure if this is something that they can continue to move forward just based on the cost, some of the bonding requirements that increased the overall scope of the project. Again, they're not asking for tax incentives for the project. I threw out a couple of scenarios, but those would all have to be vetted out. We could, just to throw an option out there, we could partner with I'll just say like the community foundation, set aside some funding out of our ARPA to incentivize projects that check the boxes of affordable / workforce type housing projects that this body has identified in their action plan. That could be something like if in this case we have 3 out of 5 units that meet that requirement, that threshold, could we potentially incentivize those 3 with some funds that are set aside in a revolving fund through the community foundation that potentially other groups could participate with as well, and try to support that project through that type of scenario. And Andrea with Housing North has worked very closely with us as well. The state has passed some pilot language that potentially could qualify this development for a pilot, obviously a very small pilot, but something similar to what we've done or considered in larger projects to try to incentivize affordable workforce housing options in our community as well. So really just trying to keep the momentum going on this project. I really don't want it to die on the vine, if you will. So I believe the ownership group, Bob and Dick, or maybe one of them at least, have dialed into the Zoom platform and are available to speak as well. And so I'll kind of turn it over to either one of them to kind of talk if they so desire.
I have a question.
Yeah. You want to ask it now?
I might as well ask why she's trying to hook it up. It says 3 units running rates affordable, the 80 to 120 AMI. How long does that last?
See, we would have a development agreement between us as the city and the developer, the Wine Guys group. So we could say if we're going to incentivize this project with any city funds, right now it's a 5-year commitment that CDBG has. We could say we want it 10 years, or we want it, whatever. As long as we can come to an agreement through a development agreement, we can work that out, through.
Well, I know we can look it out, but if they say no, they won't do that.
Well, that's the question you could ask.
That's the question. Yeah.
Hi,
Can you hear us okay? Hi there.
where would we like to start?
I don't know if you heard any of my introduction at all. If you want to fill in any details, anything you want to highlight.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank all the work that's been done here, and obviously we're up for the grant to try to make this affordable. And just as the process has moved along, there were some things that came up. Obviously, we anticipated that the cost of the project would be more than it was when we looked into it a few years ago because of all the inflationary issues. But a couple of things really stood out, and one was we're not aware of the need for the surety bond, and that added $30,000 to the project. And then we have to sprinkle the building, which we actually thought we would have to, but when we had looked at this 4 years ago, the cost was around 30. And now the overall cost with tap in and all that sort of thing, because we have to do the lower levels, about 150,000. So those two things are, that's probably almost 20% of the project. And really what's come, where we're at now is when we look at we have the amounts that were at the 80% level for the 3 units. And then looking at what is, an acceptable workforce housing kind of amount for the other 2, we're not at a positive cash flow is really where it comes, which was surprising to us. I mean, this grant was significant, and again, we appreciate it and all the effort that Shane has put into this and the city staff. But that's where we're at, is we have to decide if this is going to work, and that's why we started to talk to Shane about some opportunities. I don't really know what is available, but we're that close to, we just want to make it so that the break even and cash flow is there from the beginning. Once we get this on, I guess the other thing that happened too, by the way, obviously, is what was discussed in the last project, and that's the interest rates. Now, I mean, when we first looked into this, it was, I don't know, it was about 4.5%. And now when we convert the construction loan, it's going to be 7%. So we have acquired more financing potential. We started off with, about 400,000, and we have acquired more to get to where we needed to for where this bid is. But we're just looking to see if there's anything that could help to make this a viable project. So I think I'm certainly happy to answer questions, but I think that's really the main gist of where we're at here.
So Bob, what are you asking for?
Oh, I don't know exactly. I mean, I think that, we're talking, and looking at the pro forma to see where the cash flow is, and that it's somewhere, I think around 50,000 would probably make a difference on this. I have a difficult, because it's kind of really what we're, you're talking about the amount that it was the bond requirement, because that's the other thing is that the bond, you have to guarantee the entire project, not just the amount that you all are on the hook for. We have a 30-year relationship with JR Construction and John Plickta, and so I didn't anticipate that, and that made that go up quite a bit. And then, really because of the whole tap in sprinkling thing, that's really what added a whole lot to it. And obviously, if, for instance, 50,000 was something that we could do, that's not covering all of those things by any means. But I think that where we're trying to do is get this thing to where it's break even. Because that's, I think, a pretty critical thing in our minds.
Okay. So you're asking for $50,000 from the city?
Yes, in some shape, way, or form. Because, we had talked about, for instance, the tap-in fees. And we also tried to get the surety bond to be either waived or to be just for your amount, and just the language with the grant, for instance, on the bond, that it didn't allow for that.
Right.
Is my understanding.
What is the cost of the tap-in fees? Is it listed?
I don't know, because it's part, I can't remember exactly, because it's
John
part
can
of
probably, John, could you or Mike
You want to come up to the microphone?
push it on so it's green, please? Thank you.
Hi, John Plickta, builder, 29 years in Petoskey, worked on a lot of commercial, a lot of residential. Always trying to crack the nut on affordable housing. Ever since been here, looked at a lot of the top stories in the downtown district, and it just has never been able to. One of the things I thought I'd do is just briefly try to enlighten you to some of the plight of the builder. Now, I know you maybe don't think builders have a plight, but on affordable housing, we're trying to get a very small area so that people can afford it. And what happens is that in a 1,200 square foot home, you have a kitchen, a laundry, and a bath and a half. In a 300 square foot apartment, you have a kitchen, a laundry, and a bath. Your laundry, kitchen, and baths are like $600 a square foot if you wanted to put a number to it. Your bedrooms, living rooms are like $175 a square foot. So the larger the room, the more of those high-priced units get spread out for cost per foot. So when you take affordable housing, you put 5 units and you cram all these kitchen, bath, laundries in. I understand where this guy was coming from. I mean, trying to get these things to pencil is very, very tough.
What is the cost what is the cost of the tap-in fees? That was the question.
The tap-in fee is $10,000 for the sprinkler system.
Okay.
All right. The sprinklers are at 132 plus your tap in plus some of the other costs and the excavation that they wanted. Trying to give you an idea of what we saw as additional cost was the bond 32, sprinklers 132, tap in fee was 10,000. So that's putting us up at 174,000. So we're like 17% of the project, and that was just kind of our blindsided number. In 2017, we had a sprinkler quote for 2 apartments for 24,000. It wasn't 30, it was 24. Today's quote is 132, just the sprinklers without the tap in and everything. All right, so you can see that our price per everything has gone up, and you already know that. Price of housing in 2017 when we did this was $280 a square foot. Price of housing today
360 if you're lucky to 400. All right. Now, this isn't big residential housing. These are big residential. This is normal residential housing. We just built 2 houses that were 1,200 square feet in the last 2 years. And these poor people had to pay 400 a square foot for it when the normal price was at 350. All right, just because of the laundries. So this project has taken us up, and so since we presented to the city our first go around for cost breakdown, we're ready to resubmit at $1,083,000, and we've reduced our cost by 7%. That's just JR Construction saying, how do we make this work? My son, my daughter-in-law, myself, how do we make this work? We believe in it. Bob and I have been talking about this for years, and all of a sudden, here we are presented with it. How do we make it work? Now, 7% isn't a huge number, but when we increase the total cost of the project by 17%, we didn't offset it. We're still 10% above anything. That's our blindsided number. And I think that's what Bob's drawn to, is the blindsided number that we just can't absorb because the numbers are so tight. All right. So I think, I think as far as giving an idea of where our costs are, affordable housing, and I think once again, we had another guy here talking, I think we all know that it's a mixture of public and private working. You have a lot of things, avenues, everything. But when it comes right down to it, we got public, private all working, and everybody's reducing 7%, 4%, 2%. And we're just almost there. So that's why I think we're asking city line guys, we're also asking, how can we get the city to help us with that 2, 3, 4% more to help get this thing over the top? All participants need to help in reducing. And we go to our subs. We say, look, guys, affordable housing. And they look at us like, we have 7 houses ahead of us, and you want us to squeak this in. Luckily, we have a working relationship with some very fine subs over the years, and they will. One of the guys' wives have worked at the Women's Resource Center for years. They also believe in this, but they don't need it. They don't need this job. But we are asking them, and they'll work with us. So that's, we're getting these 2, 3, 4% reductions. This project needs the affordable template. If we can get these reductions, we can get it under the wire and make it as an example for what can happen in these upper stories in Petoskey. All these things that are housing bats and pigeons.
So what are you asking for? Is this a loan or is this a grant?
Well,
I mean,
I think,
what is it?
I don't know the specific, I think reduction in cap-in fee for the sprinkler system that we have to have per MEDC or the state, the HUD, there's a long list of stuff. We're looking for the bond. It's at $32,000 to get this bond that covers the money that you'll be given, which will be used on the project, which is $500,000, but it also has to cover all of the money that Line Guys puts towards the project, which is going to be over that amount. And so you have $32,000 covering their money that they don't want covered, but it's required. So we'd like a reduction on that as well. I think, is that in keeping with what you're thinking, Bob?
We're not looking for a loan, is the answer to that question.
Okay.
We can borrow money, I guess, but again, what we're trying to do is make this affordable. And for us to do this, we don't want to get into a project that we're going to lose money on.
Of course.
And right now, that's in looking at all of the numbers associated with the rents that we will be able to charge. So 3 of these are going to be at the 80th percentile.
How long will those be there? They could be 120% too, though. I mean, 80 to 120, yes. But how long will this rent restriction that you're off? I'm talking about with the three, how long would that last?
Well, the requirement on the grant from the
It's
state.
5 years.
5 years, that's correct. A couple things before I answer that question. Right now, I'll just say that we were planning on doing it for 5 years. Because again, what I'm telling you is that with that, we're below break even right now. But so we can talk about that because I understand you're looking for something to make a commitment on your part.
Yes.
But I want you to also understand that this is just set up as workforce housing. I mean, they're very small apartments. They're on top of a restaurant. We don't have parking. And so, I mean, that's the possibility. It's just the way that we made it.
Okay.
It would stay within a workforce housing. I would argue that all of them are going to be at a workforce housing level relative to what people are paying right now in Petoskey. And, and so, because one of the things about this is the dollar amount that is required from the MEDC includes utilities. And so we have to pay for the utilities as well. And so in looking at this, that's why I'm not asking for a lot, because, I think you just start getting these things where it's a trade-off, because what we're trying to do is get to the point where it will eventually make some money. And at the beginning, so to have a bigger loan that we have to service would not help that situation. I don't know what you're interested in as far as requiring that. Shannon and I talked about, the 80 to 120 that people look at for this, I don't see us going over that. That's something that we certainly would commit to if you wanted to do something like that. I think 80% would be tough for forever.
Yeah, Mr. Moore.
For me, I certainly support what you're doing, but I'm not clear if we're looking at ARPA funds. I did just a little bit of research on this today. I'm not an expert by any means, but it looks like from my review that there's very, very specific requirements for the use of ARPA funds in this lane. And I just would need more information about that if that's the avenue we're looking to take before I'd be able to vote on that one way or the other. So I just want to put that on the record.
Well, I certainly can't answer that question.
Huh? 50,000. The bond is 32 and the tap in is 10, right? That's 42,000.
Right.
Whereas 130.
Well, then then they need 107.
No, he said 50.
Now, and again, this project is much higher than we thought it was going to be.
Right.
As we moved along in this, we just kept saying, okay, we still have this much wiggle room and we're willing to absorb this. And so, we're not asking for that kind of money. You guys have a lot of things going on.
Yep.
We're just trying to get, those two things make sense, actually,
Yep.
for what you're saying.
Yep.
And so.
Mr. Shields, you had a question or comment?
Yep, thanks, Mayor. And Bob, so my question is, could the city get maybe a longer time frame, whether it's in a deed restriction or in addition, can we get through a deed restriction or some other mechanism, agreement of that there will be year-round housing? So a deed restriction that they have to be occupied 10 months out of the year.
Sure. I mean, that's something that we would definitely do, because we don't, my understanding that you can do VRBO downtown, and that has never been something that we want to do. First of all, this is really something that's kind of near and dear to us. It's not just, something that it's a cause that we are pretty committed to, which we are, but, we have problems with our staff with their ability to live in any proximity to where they work. And so, yes, that's something that we would be happy to do. That's Affirmative.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Council, where do you want to get this money from? Ms. Walker?
Thanks, Mayor. I would think that potentially ARPA funding could be a source of this, and I believe it. I know that there are restrictions on ARPA funding, as Council Member Moore suggested. But it is intended for these kind of projects. I guess my only hesitancy is like, if you're coming to us, to city council asking for $50,000, like making sure that that's enough. Like if you're still in that break mode, even, or just percentages above what you need to be to break even. Being in this position that we are here at city council, we're very well aware that any affordable housing project will require the heaviest of subsidies. That means local, that means statewide, and that even means federal subsidies. Philanthropic money, as you've mentioned, the Petoskey Harbor Springs Area Community Foundation. I feel like you are pulling all the pieces together. You've tightened your belt. I can get a percent here. I can get a percent here. Maybe demolition day is a public event. Come with your sledgehammer, community members. So I understand the need for the public-private partnership. I understand the need for a heavy lift, and that anything affordable has to be uber subsidized. So I feel like this is a good discussion for what that looks like for the city of Petoskey, and
Are you making a motion?
how we would like to see our ARPA funding.
Would you like to make a motion?
I was just giving a comment, Mayor. Is there any more discussion before I make a motion?
Well, we can always discuss after your motion, because that's always where the discussion is supposed to go anyway. Mr. Wagner?
My only comment, like I'm in favor of helping this project succeed.
Okay,
And I know getting a definition around ARPA and what it can or can't be used for will be an
Okay.
important piece. I mean, we won't go forward with that piece. But I several months ago, we discussed ARPA funds, not using them yet until we figure out a plan. And I think a couple of people suggested that, man, if we can use that as matching dollars in some way, that would be incredible. And I would love to see if the community foundation would participate in whatever we giving, matching to help the project even further.
Bob is on the board of the Community Foundation, correct, Bob?
I am.
And I think that's why he did not go to the Community Foundation, correct?
That's correct. You know, and if I could just speak to what Lindsay said, I mean, you know, this is pretty tight. That's why I said 50. But, you know, first of all, we understand that the state, really coming from HUD, has made a significant contribution to this project. And I have to tell you that when we started, you know, when John was talking about us looking at this years ago, we started into this and it was, oh, there's no way that this is affordable. We can't do it. And then when I talked to Andrea, we, you know, moved this along and got to this. And when that amount was what they talked about, I thought there is no way this project's not going to be viable with that situation. Never. And, you know, as we moved along, you just kept running into these things. And so, yes, it is tight, Lindsay. But you know what? I think the thing about for us is that we're pretty committed to this project. And if we look at this and that's why I don't want to get into a commitment that's going to make this long-term not viable. So in the short term, what we want to do is make this to be a break even from a cash flow standpoint. And then moving forward, we're hoping that the interest rates come down, that, you know, I mean, rents are naturally going to go up somewhat as time goes on. And that's how we're looking at this. And so I think the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, we're not trying to get as much as we can. What we're trying to do is make this happen. And we're very committed to this. This is a big deal to us. We think I've always looked at the downtown and thought, this is just a wasted space. The infrastructure is already there. It would make the downtown more viable. And then since I've been here, this housing situation has just deteriorated to the point where it affects how we do business. And so that's where I'm at with it.
We don't need that tonight. I was just going to say, and I don't want to speak for Bob, but he doesn't need us to write a check today. One, I think he just wants to understand is there appetite to potentially come alongside this project and incentivize it to the tune of around that number that he threw out. And obviously I'll do some due diligence on ARPA. I did quickly do some searching this afternoon. I saw where Ottawa County allocated $10 million of their ARPA funds to their community foundation and set up a revolving fund for affordable housing projects using their ARPA allocation. So I'm pretty certain it can be done, but obviously we'll work through that and kind of vet that out fully.
That's revolving fund,
Yeah,
so the money would come back in. After it goes out, it comes back in.
yeah, but there
Payment.
other folks are pouring money into that as well. It's not just the community.
Okay.
So
I don't have a problem with this project. I know the people involved in this. I think Bob and Mary are strong community advocates. They provide a lot of opportunities for people for employment in this city through multiple restaurants. I don't have a problem with this, but you understand one gift that I believe we have is ARPA. And I guess if you wish to gift money out of ARPA, that would be my goal would be to go out of, not taking it out of something else but ARPA. And I know, I don't have a problem with 50,000 out of ARPA. Mr. Moore.
Well, just a point of clarification, I 100% agree that ARPA funds can be used for housing, but there's some very specific requirements. That's the best that I know based on what I looked at today as to what housing qualifies. And I just don't know what that is at this
How
point.
about if we do a motion that says basically if ARPA isn't the thing, then he's asking for 50,000 somehow, some way through the city for support for this project. That's the bottom line.
Do we need a motion, city manager? Are you looking for? a
yes.
Mr. Wagner.
I'm sorry, one more.
Yeah.
The key thing for me is I have to package all this up and get it out to MEDC by Friday. So for me, for Bob, he needs to know, is this a project that is green? We have a green light and we're moving forward. So if that's indeed the case, then I've got obviously my marching orders by the end of this week. I need to have this packaged up, ready to go.
My frustration is we're always doing this last minute stuff with, it's got to be done by Friday. There's little time to talk or think, but I do support this project. I think it's 5 more apartments for people to, especially workforce.
Yeah, there was a lot of things we didn't know. We didn't know how the bid was going to come back. We didn't know a lot of things that we know today.
He only got one bid for this.
Mayor, that's my question. I no disrespect to John, but is that typical that I only have one bid for a project like this? Is that frustrating? And is this to be expected?
Let me address what I know.
Sure.
All right, yes, I'm of course, I'm the bidder.
Yeah, your microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
It right now, like, as I mentioned before, trying to get our subs that are loyal to get in on this and help us with their 2% or whatever and do the project is a stretch, but we've got them on board. To try and get people to come. I know that Bob and Mary were upstairs and Dick in their offices for the last month and a half, probably since the bids went out. And not once did they have a contractor call or walk through to take a look at the project. Everybody's busy. So that is, that's where we've had a relationship. I've been up in that attic more times than I care to think about. Looking at this, figuring out ways, meeting with the architect, saying, hey, what if we did this? We could shave, we could make something happen. We have a lot of fire, the suppression, separation, because it's offices and apartments and with old apartments in the back. But because it's offices, it's taking and redefining the use. Once you redefine the use, it kicks into sprinklers, it kicks into fire separation, exits. So it just added, and it's one of those things that would snowball.
I got one
Nobody's
question on here, Dan. It states on drywall, it says option included. Drywall on exterior walls, 12,000. What's option included? What's that about?
The option,
Yeah,
they have existing drywall. So we're gonna tear that off and then put new drywall back on so that we can get to all of the wiring and insulation.
I just saw the word option included.
Yeah.
So
it's
what's the option if you don't do the option included?
Well, I think the building department, which has yet to be up there and say, no, I want to see this. You
So
got
it isn't an option at all,
no.
but you put that in there.
That was if you look at that, that was a template that we were given in a bid package that we went ahead and filled out.
Okay.
And then we tried to adjust it accordingly to our normal templates.
Okay, I'm not trying to nitpick you, but I just,
No, I appreciate it. I think he asked.
we're stewards of the funds of the city of Petoskey and need to ask sometimes tough questions. And
Oh, no.
I saw it said option included, and well, what do you mean? Does it need to be if it's an option? Do I have any other discussion, Mr. Moore?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Bob, I was having some difficulty hearing you. I just want to be clear I know there's a 5-year commitment to workforce housing, but was there discussion about extending that to 7 or 10? And if so, I didn't hear your response. Thank you.
Well, for the 3 that are on there, I mean, we were trying to avoid being at 80%. Because that's one of the things that moving forward, that will make this where it isn't, where it will be above break even. But when I talked to Shane, we talked about, first of all, making this commitment of, making it year-round living. And then the other thing that, I don't know what the numbers are we're at the 80 percentile on the beginning of this project, which with including rent is pretty low.
Yeah.
And if we were gonna get to maybe, I'd wanna see what the 120 is, because that's normally the range they talk about on this with affordable housing. That would be something we would entertain for doing longer on the 3 apartments. But I don't know what that number is. What I know is that if we make this commitment to stay at 80% for longer than 5 years, that's one of the things that we're looking at here to make it so we get to a point where this is a viable project. Because in the beginning of this situation, when we run it, it's going to be tight, really tight.
Okay,
So I just have to look at it. So I guess that's, the same as finding out the
right.
details of this funding potential. I would like to know what that number is, and then we could talk about that. We're committed for this to be workforce housing forever. Is the answer to that question. It's just how you going to define that it's going to be at 80%. That's something we'd have to talk about.
Mr. Wagner, you have something?
I'd like to make a motion, but I'm not sure what the words are. Okay. And maybe Shane, you can even help. What are we authorizing? I'm happy to authorize 50,000 ARPA funds if that's what we're saying.
Doesn't have, I don't think it would have to.
Are you going, could you possibly come back to us and not by Friday, but committing you to authorize this, because I can imagine in your budget, you could find another place for the money if ARPA didn't work.
It would be use of fund balance likely, which we're obviously in a pretty strong position.
Yeah.
And I go back to, we had this as a priority in the action plan. We have it as a priority in the action plan. We have it a priority in the Livable Petoskey master plan. And at some point, we need to put our money where our mouth is and show some action. So
Yes.
As we have with the shoreline and getting out in front of that as well.
So we have a motion.
Motion, yeah.
I think if Bob and Dick and the ownership group could hear that there's a commitment to partner with them to the tune of $50,000, it doesn't really have to be vetted out tonight on what that looks like, but
Okay,
If there's a consensus on this body to support this project to the tune of $50,000, that's the direction I think
Sounds good.
I need to hear, they need to hear.
Basically, the $10,000 an apartment is what we're looking at.
Mhm.
And that apartment isn't for a 1-year term. We're looking for the long term on that. It would be, you know. If you think of the investment of 50,000 spread over 20 years, it's not a lot of money. Per apartment.
And if you look at some of the other, you know, we gave the Oprah for Lake Street valued at $82,000. The one Michigan Emmett, that one's about 200,000. So we're looking at this one at about 50, so.
So we have a motion there. We are,
Question.
Mr. Wagner.
yes,
We have a motion that we're supportive of $50,000
commitment to this project.
to this project, for the City Park Grill rental, rehab project.
With some instrument guarantee year round.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, if the motion can include that this is workforce housing 80 to 120% that is year round for a minimum duration of 5 years.
Yeah, that has to happen.
Has to be at least 5 years.
It will be at least 5 years, so that has to happen. The question becomes 80 to 120 if you want to go, well, we're gonna have a development agreement, so we're kind of going ahead of ourselves a little bit, but we'll fine tune all those numbers through a development agreement, but
You know the max of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So. Mr. Wagner, are you good with the additions to the?
Yes, I am.
To those?
I'll be happy.
You get that? That was year round. That was year round.
I can.
Are you up to me right now?
Rental.
Speaking.
No, I'm not.
Are you seconding the motion?
I'd be happy to second the motion.
Okay, now we'll talk about what the motion looks like.
So I have a motion by Wagner
Second,
second by Walker to support the project and commit up to $50,000.
right,
I have with an instrument, but
With the proviso that it's workforce housing 80 to 120%, year-round workforce housing at 80 to 120% with a minimum duration of 5 years. Those are my suggestions.
well, it's.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I don't know, I think the year round is, it's gotta be more longer than 5 years. I want to support something we're getting more than the 5 years. And I hear that verbally, I understand.
I look at it as these apartments are gonna be very small
That is correct.
and year round.
Correct.
I question what you're gonna get for these apartments. Even 7 years or 8 years down the road.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in light of, state laws that change that open up the door to, short-term rentals, just some assurance for this, thing that.
That'll come out through a development agreement.
Are you willing to listen to possibly 7 years or whatever these guys are talking about? Is that possible, or is it 5 according to your plan of payment back to your development of it?
What's that? I'm sorry, will you ask that question again?
Are you locked in at 5-year commitment, or is it possible? Mr. Shields asked 7 years. Is that in your ballpark area?
For the 3 that have to be at 80%?
Yeah.
No, we're not. I'd want to look at that. And I mean, I could definitely be committed to the 80 to 120 for a longer period of time. 80 is really tight because again,
Are we 80 to 120? Or are we 80%?
yeah, because these are
We say 80 to 120 is fine.
Yeah, 80 to 120, that's what we're talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
Right?
Sure, for those three, we would do that for 7 years, yes.
There you go. Okay. He said yes. He said yes to the 80 to 120. 120.
And you realize that for 5 years, it has to be at 80.
Right. It has to be 80 or it has to be 80 to 120.
No, it just has to be at 80. This is
Yeah.
what.
Oh, dear. Okay. Boy, that's tough. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The rent is very low. for-
Are you not going to give raises to any of your employees? Does that mean to keep them at that level?
You're hard to hear, but I think you're asking me if it could go up in inflation for the year. They change it every year what that is.
We're good. The discussion,
Where are we at with the motion? I just get,
we have the motion,
what's the readback of the motion? Are we still at a minimum of 5 or have we moved that?
we moved to 7.
I never said 7, so.
You asked if they were okay with 7, you mentioned.
I did not say that at all, Mayor. So I was going back to, I was asking for year-round housing for a longer period of time. I didn't say a period of time. I would actually put on the table, it sounds like Bob that's his goal. So I'd say as what we want is to do this support this. We want year-round housing, we want a deed restriction that says it guarantees legally that there is going to be year-round housing.
Yeah, I think we'd want to have some kind of time frame in there just because if we sold this or whatever, but I think that's a pretty long commitment. I'd have to talk to Dick in that, but as far as making some level of commitment on that, yes, we would do it. And I don't think, I think 10 years would be fine, but I just doing it forever, that seems a little strong. Just because, and I'd have to talk to Dick about that. That I couldn't make without talking to him.
Mayor,
Can I take it back to Sarah back now for rereading of the motion?
Or the city
And we're gonna
manager.
use her professional clerk skills tonight.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
please.
3 years of training is coming out here.
so the original motion was by Wagner, supported by Walker, to support the project and commit up to $50,000 to provide workforce housing at 80 to 120% for a duration of 5 years for the 3 units. That's what I heard the first motion.
Okay.
Year-round workforce.
Oh, I crossed off year on.
And a minimum duration of 5 years.
And
Year, okay, to provide year-round workforce housing at 80 to 120% or at a minimum duration of 5 years for those 3 units.
yes, and Bob, don't worry. I know you said it, you had to do 80% for those 3 the first 5 years. We're saying 80 to 120. If something happens, they take it, say you can charge, you can work with people higher than you can.
I
Okay,
understand, was
We're
all,
making a commitment on the other part. That's not ours to worry about.
okay.
All right, what question?
Thanks for bearing with me. I don't understand how what we're asking is anything additional to what they already have to do for the grant that they're getting. And so so they're coming to us, asking us for additional support, which I definitely want to help support. But we're not getting anything in return because what we're saying in this resolution return is already what they're supposed to need to do to get the federal grant or the state grant.
And what are you asking for then?
That 3 times.
I'm asking for a more long-term commitment that's legally binding to, I'm just keeping it simple to year-round housing. I'm not talking about the price limit right now. I'm just talking about year-round housing. Keep it simple, getting one win out of this. And so it sounds like we're not there to do the permanent one, which would be a deed restriction. So I don't know, I'm not sure how to go for there to get my.
10 years. I'm okay with 10 years. Because if they sell the business in 10 years from now, the whole game could change.
Well, don't we want to, if we're investing this, don't we want this even this sold to have that insurance? I mean, I understand from developers and owners that it's not necessarily ideal, but from our end's community, that's what we want. So that's, if we can get that, that's what I'm asking or pushing for. If not, I still do want to support this project, so I just be less reluctant to do so.
I think, just if I could say, I think we would greatly appreciate getting $50,000 to put this thing over. I think asking for a deed restriction for the life of that, for that amount is pretty high price to pay for that. And again, what we're trying,
So
I know you can't do a handshake thing. There's things that you need, but that we are committed to this project. And that's what we want to do. And we're making them in a manner that I don't really see how anyways. So, we could talk about the details if we want to try to get it longer.
One question.
The motion referred only to 3 units. I thought with the span of 80 to 120%, it was all the units.
Did you hear her question, Bob?
I thought we were going to do it on the 3, was my understanding.
That's what I thought so too. That's what it says in the agreement, in that agreement was 3 out of the 5 would be 80 to 120.
There's going to be 80. And
To start with,
the remaining 2 units. The remaining 2 units were going to be no more than 120. So if you have 80 to 120 as the range in the motion, that should cover all 5 units, not just 3. That's what I'm saying.
And I would have to find out what that amount was, the 120. Just to not answer that question. I don't know what that is.
well, I'm going to go to a vote for the support of what's on the table, on the table now. And Shane can work with you, Bob. Is that good?
Yeah. That's good.
Okay. I've got a request from Mr. Moore to read the motion again, Miss Beck.
Motion by Wagner, seconded by Walker, to support the project and commit up to $50,000 to provide year-round workforce housing at 80 to 120% at a minimum duration of 5 years for 3 units.
Okay. I go to Miss Beck for roll.
Oh, sorry, you're right.
Mr. Wagner.
Wagner.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Demore.
Yes.
Mr. Moore, you have a statement?
Yeah, I only want to make clear in the record, I do support this project, but I just feel like there was a lot of lack of clarity here. And for that reason, I'm not comfortable moving forward at this point. Thank you.
This will come up again.
Mhm.
This will come up again before us. Okay, we're all set.
Thanks, Bud.
Next is city council comments, and I'll start with Ms. Walker, Ward 4. Ward 3, Mr. Wagner.
My comment is when I was knocking on doors in 2019 campaigning, I met a wonderful woman named Marla. Martincheck. She was sitting on her porch and she had a daughter and granddaughter living with her and the grandson. The grandson had severe allergies to all sorts of things. And she said there used to be an Easter egg hunt that was allergen free. We got it pulled back together with a number of folks and it was ready to go in April of 2020. April 1st, 2023, there's going to be an allergen-free Easter egg hunt at the library with my Tip of the Mid Spartans volunteering. McLean and Aiken have donated books as basically Easter egg treats. And so take a look at that. It's happening, I think at 9 a.m. or something like that. But I'm excited that it's actually come to fruition after making it through COVID.
Mr. Steele, Ward 2.
I just want to express gratitude for leaders at all levels of the city, whether it's city staff, elected officials, appointed officials, residents. I've just witnessed residents coming to meetings, Parks and Recs community meetings, planning commission meetings, and voicing ideas and their concerns and questions. So I want to appreciate and show gratitude to all the leaders at all levels of our city.
Good.
I provided all council members with the new proposed Open Meetings Act draft for your review. If you have input, be happy to receive it. I particularly point out section 3B, which is at least proposing to allow remote public meeting attendance under certain prescribed circumstances, which certainly helped all of us when somebody is sick or needs to be out of town. And as a postscript to our last discussion, I really would like to engage council members on how we might move forward on an incentives policy. Because I do think it would be helpful. Obviously, I think we all want to support affordable housing in the community, but there's a lot coming at us on this, some of it very close to deadlines, and we really don't have a framework that we're working from. So I'm going to once again ask that we somehow find a way to move forward on that. Thank you.
I received stuff on the Monarch City, via Monarch City. This city was noted years ago. There are elderly people who still got out of school early to collect Monarch milkweed pods that were used for life jackets during World War II. I got a contact asking if we would be interested in becoming a Monarch City. I don't think, and I talked to Kendall. We don't think there's a lot to do with it, but it would be something that would, he said he would make a real commitment to it and wanted to do it. So with that being said, I call this meeting adjourned with no further business to come before council. Good night.